Hello, everyone. It's Joe, the magical one here, and I'm doing another interview today with Emily Schweber, who is a casting professional for video games and films as well. How are you doing today?
Fine, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I wanted to talk to you about your experience as a casting director and casting associate, but your career goes back a fair way. And I wanted to ask you, rather than starting with where we are now, starting more at the beginning and how you became involved in casting as a career.
I knew I wanted to do something in the movie business, but I didn't know what the different jobs were, what I was qualified to do. I knew I didn't want to go back to school. So I read a book called The Movie Book, and it described all the jobs. And casting sounded interesting, but I knew nothing about it. And I was living in Northern California, and we went to dinner at a writer's house, a Hollywood writer who was living up there. And he said, I have to look at these casting tapes. They want my opinion for the lead role, who was a kid, a child. And he put on these audition tapes, and I had never seen anything like it, and it was fascinating. So I started calling casting directors and offering to work for free. And I worked for this woman who worked on commercials. So that's how I started in commercial casting. And she also taught me how to cast background extras. So when a movie company came up to the Bay Area, I would, organize and cast the extras and be on the set. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, I started working as a casting assistant on movies.
Wow. So in terms of your school journey, did you do theater or drama or acting in school? Were you involved in drama in that way?
Not at all. I did nothing like that. Although a lot of casting directors do come from that background. It is a natural progression, but you can come from any kind of background. I was a fine arts major in college. I was a silk screener, a printmaker, but it was just something that I was drawn to, that I found interesting. And it's kind of an old-fashioned apprenticeship. You work for a casting director. You learn. It takes a matter of time before you can go out on your own. And there are these different legacies of casting directors that come from other casting directors. And now I've trained, assistants who have become casting directors. So it just requires learning it for a matter of time.
So would you say it's a sort of a profession that you learn by doing effectively?
Right.
Wow. Do you think that you had work experience from previous jobs that gave you skills to do it, or was it purely something that you just fell in love with and developed from the ground up?
I was in sales for a while, and I think that really helped me on the phone, because you do have to sell the project, or to agents. We talk to agents. We don't talk directly to the actors.
Yeah.
When we're making offers, and so those kind of, I think, sales skills are, having talked extensively on the phone, did help me and does help me. It's a job that it's about strategy, it's about psychology, it's about business negotiations, and then there's the whole artistic part of it, which is working with actors and helping to draw out better auditions from actors. The casting director part of it. It has all these facets to it. It's really an amazing job, and I love it every day. I look forward to going to work.
That's always a good scenario to be in, for sure.
Yeah.
So you effectively were under the wing of a casting director in order to grow, and I know that you were considered. Was it at that point you were considered as a casting associate? Is that the right terminology?
You start out usually as a casting assistant, and then a casting associate takes on more responsibilities and would be probably in all the casting sessions with the casting director, or sometimes doing casting sessions for the casting director, going to meetings. Maybe a casting assistant would do a lot more of the scheduling and checking availability, sending out the materials. And after working for a couple casting directors, I was really lucky to get hired by a fantastic Hollywood casting director that was very well loved and very well revered. And she worked on fantastic movies. So, her clients were Joel Schumacher, James Cameron, Curtis Hanson. And I worked on about 100 movies for her.
So this is when you started getting involved in quite mainstream and big budget Hollywood productions. Because you were involved in films like, obviously, Terminator 2, Judgment Day being a huge blockbuster film at the time, especially after the success of the first Terminator film. And how did you end up growing and working your way up this ladder in terms of your employment as a casting assistant, associate, and then onwards from there?
Well, I stayed with her for about 10 years. So that was a long time to learn, absorb. She was my mentor. So we were in so many different situations that eventually you just learn what to do and figure out what to do and develop taste. And I remember in the beginning, I used to be in a casting session and she would say, "Oh, weren't they fantastic? Wasn't that good?" And I thought, I didn't see the difference between everybody else. It takes a while to develop an eye and a gut instinct, which now I don't even think about it.
I suppose you could compare it to being a food taster or food critic, and you learning the subtle differences between different dishes and things. And that takes a while to develop that palate. And I suppose you've developed that eye and ear for talent. Would that be
exactly like working in a restaurant kitchen and working your way up? And after a while, I went out on my own, and that was probably about 20 years ago. So I've been working on my own ever since.
Wow. Did you feel trepidation when you went from being under somebody's wing as a casting associate to being the casting director and kind of the buck stopping with you? Was that a big step, or was it just a natural progression for you?
I think it was a natural progression. There were a few jobs that I was still working for Mally, and I was doing jobs on my own as well. Like I would do them at night or on the weekends. And so she was still around for me to ask advice from. And there was just a natural progression that way. But sure, it still happens. Sometimes when I get a job, I still feel trepidation. How am I going to do this? And it's kind of like, it's like a big blob of clay, and then you gradually chip away and turn it into something.
You say about working nights and weekends. Is this a job that I presume it doesn't have the standard 9 to 5 trappings, as it were? Sounds like it's a bit more of a life.
Well, I was doing that mainly because I was working in the casting associate job all day long. But I think to a certain extent, we're on call if someone needs us. There are definitely conversations, and often I'll talk to a director every day, or every night, or a few times a day during the course of us working together. And then once the casting's over, we don't talk anymore. It's like a very intense, long, short-term relationship, and then it's over. But I don't really believe in working at night, so I don't do that. I don't require my office or anyone that works here to work at night. It should be able to be finished during the day.
Yeah. So obviously, when you're working these projects, it's like you say, it's quite intense. do you find that you take on a project, it's very intense, and then you take a break and then take on another project, or is it more of a continual overlapping and shifting from project to project?
It's freelance work, so anyone in this kind of work in the movie business knows how it is. You never know when your next job is coming. Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes one job ends and you have no idea when you're going to get the next job. Yeah. So there are times in between when we're not working, and then there are times when we're working on maybe multiple jobs at once.
So yeah, I suppose
it's just like an actor.
Yeah, it's. I was going to say it's the same with a lot of self-employed contract by contract work. Of you always have that little bit of pressure pushing on you to look for the next job and to look for the next role, or and keep it coming in. But hopefully, it means you can also have the freedom to dictate your own working hours and that part of your life, as it were. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk to you about some of the films that you've been involved in. Obviously, I mentioned Terminator 2, which you were a casting associate for that one. Like, with these big films, is there a lot of pressure to get the decisions correct? Is there do you feel pressure from outside sources like investors and people further up the chain? Is that something, or is it just another day at work where you're just trying to get the job right, the same as you would in any film?
I think that they all have pressure, because if it's a small independent film, that is somebody's money that they've raised, maybe with investors, family, their own money. And there's a lot of pressure, of course, to get it right. And with a studio film, of course, it's about finding the right actors to serve the story and the director's vision. So it's a lot of responsibility. And then there's always a deadline. So it's once the job starts, it's got to be done in a certain amount of time and managed correctly. So there's a lot of pressure with time also. We don't always get every actor that we pursue. So then you go to the next choice. There has to be ideas and lists and navigating how to get those people, and working with the team, the producers, the director, the executives.
Do you find with the larger productions, do you find that they often have someone very specific in mind, or is it left to the casting professionals to find people to suit the roles, and sort of how much of that process is handed over to you of making those decisions, and how much of it is, I want this, find me this?
Mm-hmm. I think every project is different. Some have a few actors attached, or one actor attached. It's the writing that we're going by, the writing of the script, but there are many roles that are left kind of open to, I could bring in a variety of different actors. And that's really fun to be able to do that.
And just obviously there's projects like Terminator, big sci-fi, big budget action, and then there's projects like True Lies, which is more of a comedy action, as it were. Do you find from and then things like The Green Mile, which is very much an emotive drama-led experience, do you find from genre to genre of the type of things which are going to be happening on script, is the casting process very different, or is it largely similar? You're just looking for things to fit the script?
I mean, the casting process itself is largely similar. There are some roles that require more of a search and outreach. Maybe if it's a child, like in Terminator 2, which I can tell you're very interested in, there was a large casting search going on, looking at kids that were already in the industry, and then kids, and Eddie Furlong, who was eventually cast, was a non-professional. He had never done any acting before. And the audition process, I think, for whether it's film or games, it's similar. Some roles you cast a wide net for, some roles maybe there's a list of 3 or 4 people that you're going to target. So it's every project has a lot of different ways to go about it. But the audition process, I would say, is similar.
Okay. On the subject of games, obviously you were involved in casting the Super Mario Brothers movie back in 1993, I think it was. And obviously that was... there'd been movies that referenced games, but that was more of a direct, larger project that was based directly on a video game. Were you aware of video games at the time? Was that something on your radar at all? Did that kind of awaken that within you? Was it something you looked into?
Well, I guess that movie was unusual at the time, right? Because there weren't many, but Super Mario Brothers was a really huge thing then. And so I was aware of it, yes. But I didn't get into video games because I'm a gamer or thought this would be a fun thing to do. It happened coincidentally. And now it's a very big part of my life.
So, I mean, do you play many games now, or is it more that you enjoy watching the experience and seeing it come to life, as it were?
I was at an orientation event at my daughter's new school. Mm-hmm. And, it's like barbecue and all the parents are together and all the kids are together and they're getting to know each other. And I happened to sit next to a guy. What do you do? What do you do? And he said that he was a video game director. I had no idea what that was. I said, "Oh, I'm a casting director. Maybe you need some casting." He said, "No, I do it all myself." So he was not interested. Mm. I ran into him a few times over the next couple of years at school. And one day, finally, he called and he said, I think I need you, because it was at that time when a lot of the actors that were doing games were voice actors and very, very good voice actors. And then there were other actors who did motion capture, but they didn't do the voice.
Yeah.
And then it kind of evolved into actors that were doing the full performance capture. I mean, there's still lots of voice actors in games, as you know, and that's a huge part of it. But the director, whose name is Tom Keegan, and he's an incredible director. He said, they're asking me about somebody who's on this HBO show, and then they're asking me if I can give them some ideas of actors that are similar to Tilda Swinton. He said, I've never done a list like that. I don't know how to reach these other actors. And I said, I can do it. I can help you. So that's how we started working together. And by having a casting director, I think he discovered that he was able to focus on other things and not have to spend so much time going through seeing all the actors and all the scheduling and all the fine detail that an organization that has to be done. But he is still very involved with I do the pre-screening ahead of time, and then I show him choices, or I choose who should come into his sessions. And then he works with all the actors in the director sessions.
So it means he gets a curated list of what's going to suit his need, rather than, like you say, the wide net where you end up with all sorts of things.
Because I can spend days or weeks seeing actors for different roles, and it's very time consuming.
So in games, obviously, you ended up working on some incredible AAA titles, several titles under Star Wars, like Jedi Fallen Order and the Star Wars Battlefront 2, and then more recently Squadrons. How, in terms of your experience in casting, you said that there are a lot of similarities between casting video games like that or casting film. But what sort of differences are there? In what way do they differ?
Right. The franchises the first franchise I started working with Tom Keegan on was Wolfenstein.
Which I will say, I love the casting of as well.
Yeah. And it's Tom who's really taught me a lot about what to look for and what the differences are. And I guess with film, we're auditioning like right here, right? It's all about the face and the eyes. And with video game auditioning, we're using a bigger space, using more full body, maybe blocking out some of the scenes, using the room, sometimes even props.
And that's the motion capture, presumably.
Yeah, because all the games I work on are performance capture. It's the actor's voice, facial, expressions, everything, movements, and I learned to listen to the voice, the quality of the voice, and the information that has to come out that is giving the player directions and choices. So it's listening to voice and the movement, and it's kind of like multitasking for the actor. It's more like theater.
So obviously within these games, especially things like the sci-fi games, I know you've worked on more militaristic things like Call of Duty and Battlefield and that kind of thing. But with things like Star Wars, obviously you're casting alien creatures as well as more human presenting roles. With those stranger creatures, obviously things like bodily movement is very different, and the facial capture is going to differ as well. How do you approach that kind of casting challenge?
Well, I don't really differentiate that much. I mean, I will know when I'm auditioning if a character is not human. If a character is going to be, sorry, there's some noise out there.
That's okay, don't worry.
If the character is going to be some kind of an alien or android, but I'm still looking for the character. So it's really not that different. In something like Call of Duty, which is a great franchise to work on, there really does have to be a believable posture and stance and movement. We've got a lot of prop weapons here, and that's a very important element for a game like that. But again, the acting, finding the character is most important.
So things like you want your actors to have training in firearms and how to appropriately be using them and holding them, and things like their mannerisms if they are performing militaristic gestures, like getting people to hold and stop in a squad by hand movements, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing, although that can be worked on after we cast the character.
Okay.
But it's finding the authentic character as written. If it's if it's a rebellion leader, or no matter what the character is, we're just trying to find someone who can realistically bring that to life. And the writing on these games are amazing. I mean, there are emotional scenes, there are real relationships between the characters. And so the material that we have to work with is so well written. Mm. We can work with some fantastic actors who can bring that to life.
There's a voice actor called Troy Baker who's been involved in many games, and to me, he's someone I very much look up to. He did a chat to camera recently where he talked about how he stopped showing up to auditions, and that doesn't mean he physically wasn't there. But what he meant is that rather than the actor going into the casting room, instead it needed to be the character going into the casting room, and rather than showing them how good an actor he was and that ego being there, he needed to authentically show the person casting what he felt the character completely was, and give that role the space rather than the actor the space, as it were. So rather than trying to impress, it's not about that. It's about showing authentically, this is the character from page brought to life. And I thought that was a really important lesson to learn, as it were, to put that aside and be the person in the space. And I suppose that's part of what you're saying about is when you see someone auditioning, you don't want to see the actor really. You want to see the character that has been written, and you want that to jump out of the page and be there in real life, I suppose.
Yeah. All I can do is try to give more information to the actor about the character, about the story, about what's happening, and see if that helps them bring the character there.
So would you say that there is a lot of give and take, or do you tend to know very quickly whether somebody's got the character or not?
I mean, I think it's different from person to person. I think that I like to give each actor 2 or 3 takes, because I can help make a few adjustments, or like I said, give some information that might help. Let the actor warm up after the first take, and then it usually gets a little bit better. I mean, some actors can come in and they completely nail it on the first take, and some actors are good. Maybe they're not right for that character. So that's why it takes a lot of seeing a lot of different actors in the process.
With video games, obviously a lot of roles require efforts, and for people who don't know, efforts are things like your death screams, or if you're swinging a sword, or doing some kind of physical action that isn't dialogue necessarily, but it's the sounds you need to produce as a voice actor. Especially with things like military shooters where there's a lot of shouting, screaming, that kind of content. Is that something that you warn your talent about? Is that something that you get them to perform as part of an audition? Is that something that you need to have in the back of your head when you're doing things, or is it just a normal part of the everyday?
Some roles, definitely, we've been given. I mean, I've never heard the term efforts, but shouts or call outs.
Yeah.
Get down, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some roles we do need to hear that. And sometimes those shouts or call outs are just done kind of at the end of the audition when the director's there, just to hear someone's voice at a volume.
Okay.
But we are seeing a lot of actors that do video games, so often we know what they can do.
Obviously, with video games originally, when voices started becoming part of video games, you'd see a lot of things like the developers themselves just voicing because they were there putting work into the game, and gradually it became a space for voice actors. And now you're seeing a lot of Hollywood actors and film and stage actors now being used more in video games themselves. And rather voice actor versus actor, it's just becoming the same thing. It's all part of the same job. Do you find that that's been something you've been aware of, or have you always just seen it as actors who audition for roles, or have you seen the difference between voice actor and stage and film actor, I suppose is what I'm asking.
I think it's just blending together now. The same actors that we're casting in games are on television series or doing movies. I've noticed in the amount of time that I've been doing games, a process of, I remember having to explain it more to the agents. They should come in because it's a good thing to do, because there's a huge fan base, because it will bring a lot of recognition to them. It's a great job. It's like doing theater. Actors love that. I kind of had to push it a little bit, but now I'm getting a lot more enthusiasm from actors as actors hear about that it's a great thing to do and it's fun, from other actors who have done games. And it's just another job that is becoming, doing games is becoming more popular. Yeah. I don't think there's such a thing as a TV actor or a film actor or game actor as much anymore. There are certainly those kind of actors like Troy Baker who are huge in games and are stars of games. Yeah. But there but often we cast actors who've never done a game before, and they do really well.
Yeah, it's video games now is so part of the public zeitgeist, and people are so much more aware of it as a mainstream thing. And there's been statistics shown that of the average American household, that now video games is tipping to being more popular than watching TV, which is an incredible statistic for that kind of balance in terms of the hours spent watching, which I think is an amazing thing. But in terms of this development and this changing landscape, obviously things like video games has progressed as a technology very quickly and grown in terms of budgets and as a business. Have you found that the changes in technology in things like facial capture, body capture, vocal capture, has that impacted your work in casting in a lot of ways?
I think that when I got into casting games, because it hasn't really been that long, when I look at a game that I've cast like Call of Duty or Star Wars, I think that the likeness is very, very close to the actor. If it's a role that was written for likeness, and then there are the aliens and the other kinds of characters, but when it's supposed to look like the character, it's very, very close. So it's their facial expressions and everything else that's captured.
Yeah, because when you did Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, you part of casting Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis, and obviously he looks him as an actor and the character on the screen, they look almost identical.
We work from, first what we do is we create what's called a breakdown. And so the characters are described, it may say female, Asian, 30s, American accent. We have this description of the character, and then it'll talk about some other attributes and who they are. They're a scientist, they're brilliant biologist, or whatever they are. We're fitting that. Now, sometimes it may say that character of Cal, it could be a long description of what the character is, but it may say he's early 20s, any ethnicity. I think for that role, we might have seen 150 young guys. Wow. So it was more, I think, about Cameron's performance, which is why they chose him. He was exactly what they were looking for. Who, he fit the character, that he had all the qualities of what was on the page, and he brought all that to the audition. He's a great actor. He just it all came together.
Do you find that the actors that you see, that you still have certain actors that make you feel starstruck in any way, or is that lessened as you've been in the industry for so long?
Sure, I have actors that I'd be very excited to see, but if they're stars, they're not auditioning for me.
Do you feel that there's a certain amount of when they get big enough that process is skipped somewhat?
Well, I can say that sometimes there are actors that I've auditioned, and then I definitely know that I'm probably not going to see them in person again, because I know that their careers are going to take off.
Wow. And is that a sort of that natural charisma, somebody who just dominates a room, as it were, when they start acting, all eyes are on them, or is it a different kind of star quality that you see when that happens?
It could be a star quality. It could be, charisma, their presence, their acting training. It's just a magic that is hard to describe.
Wow. In your career, obviously you've been involved in huge projects, both in film and games. Are there any experiences you've had that you want to share? Any story? I'm sure you must have thousands of stories, but any in particular that you think that it would be interesting to share?
Remember, you brought up True Lies before. Remember the scene in True Lies where the guy is holding the camera and he's making the video for his boss,
Yeah.
With the terrorists, and he sees the camera battery blinking and he knows the battery's going to run out, but he's afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's how I felt when I was holding the camera in the auditions with Jim Cameron, and he was right behind me looking into the screen on the camera. And I saw the battery was going to run out, and I was pretty terrified. But he was fantastic to work with, very inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So I suppose when you're working with directors, almost there's almost a sort of a pressure during the casting. If they're there during the casting, there's a lot of, you're aware that they are sitting above you and wanting things to go smoothly, as it were. Yes, we really want things to go smoothly when there's a director there. Do you find that you that there's a lot of dialogue between yourself and the director, or are some directors more hands off, or does it vary from project to project, or is it mostly the same process? I mean, it's mostly the same process, but there are some directors who are more hands-on. But I mean, I think they're all deeply caring and very involved in casting. It's the part of the process that can take place pretty early on. And I think as it gets closer to shooting or production, the directors get much more busy. So we have them when they do have more time to focus on casting. So that's a good, it's a great working relationship to have. Mm. And it's probably my favorite part of the casting process are the director sessions, because I get to hear the directors direct the actors and sit back and then I get to learn from that. Obviously this, what was a job initially, has turned into a career and turned into something you've been doing for years, that you've grown in and done more and more as you've gone on. Are there places that you want to go now? Is there sort of a next step up, as it were, in terms of your career progression, or are there more sideways things that you are considering? I've never done, I mean, I would love to do a terrific series. I'm not really in the television world because all my training was in film. And then when I got jobs on my own, I've done a lot of independent movies, film festival movies, and then the games. So it would be really interesting for me to maybe cast an animated series. Wow. That seems like something that I could do because of working in games. Yeah, very much. I suppose with voice actors who work a lot in games, animation tends to be something that they're very transferable skills, as it were. So you end up doing a little bit of both, as it were. So it makes sense that there would be that world for you as well. So yeah, that would be cool. Yeah. Well, if people want to find you online, are there, in terms of your work history, you've got things like IMDb listings, which show a lot of the projects that you've worked on. And I know you've got your website as well, which is emilyschwebercasting.com. On the website, there is a way to contact me. Perfect. And are there other projects that you want to people to see? Obviously, they should play the games that you've been involved in, which I'll list some of those in the description below, and they should see the films that you've been involved in the casting as well, because some of them are just absolutely incredible titles. But are there other things in your life, like creative pursuits that you wish to publicize?
When I work on a project, it's usually about a year or two before it comes out. So I have worked on a number of games that haven't come out yet, that maybe haven't even shot yet. So it takes a while to, for them to be completed.
But you can't talk about those.
I can't talk about them.
Well, I look forward to seeing what you are involved in next. Thank you so much for talking with me today and for agreeing to be on this interview. And I hope you have a brilliant rest of the week. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And I'll see you again for another episode in future. Bye-bye.
Bye.